I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
All right, today we have kind of a calmer, hopefully more relaxing
breathing room
episode because, Hannah, you had a vicious week. Honestly.
It was an assault on every sense for days.
You went to Miami. I mean, you were doing a lot of stuff before as well, but then you went to Miami, and it was like, I was texting with you, it's like tough to keep your head above water with all the moving pieces,
yes.
right?
I mean, look, I'm not complaining in the least. This is a great gig if you can get it, covering Formula One in Miami, but also it is super intense, and yeah, I'm in recovery mode now. I got to get back to my routines.
Well, not only covering Formula One, but also Ferrari, because they had a release, at least one new release, and I saw driving one of the cars, a different car.
Yes, this was Ferrari's first ever car debut outside of Italy, which I think really speaks to how important Miami F1 is for Ferrari specifically. But yeah, they debuted actually two 12-cylinder new cars called, and I'm going to butcher the name because I'm not Italian, but it's basically called the 12 Cilindri, or Doce Cilindri, I guess, if you're Italian, but it's 12-cylinder.
Right.
And it's a coupe and a convertible. And then, I drove the 296 GTS around town. I hadn't driven that. I'd driven the GTB, but the S is the Spider version, which is actually a great car for Miami.
All right, so I want to talk about those two things separately because I believe they're very different vehicles. So when you say, let's start with the 12 cylinders, you say two cars, but you're talking about just the coupe version and the Spider version.
Yes, it's the same. It's a new model line. The 12-cylinder, which is one basically Berlinetta style, which is sort of that long, low coupe. It's a two-seater, and then there's a convertible version of that. Yeah.
And I think we can agree to say 12-cylinder.
Thank you.
Right?
That'll really help me.
I don't know. Did someone make a point that that's not how it's pronounced? Because that's how every American will pronounce it.
Yes, the Ferrari executive that I sat next to at dinner for 600, by the way, at this debut on South Beach, was very intent on having me say Doce Cilindri with the trill on the R at the end. But it's almost think it's like they think it's a funny joke to come up with names that Americans can't say. They know it doesn't matter. We'll still try to buy the cars. I feel like it's some inside joke that...
Well, it's not the first time they've had a jokey name, right?
I know.
Ferrari, Ferrari?
The La Ferrari, and also the Puro Sangue. You know, the Puro Sang is how I would normally say it, but then when you go drive it, all the executives are telling you, no, Puro Sangue. You know, and I'm even still not saying it correctly. So it's like they just come up with these names that Americans cannot say, and we still want to buy the cars.
Well, so it doesn't matter, obviously, what it's called when you look at the thing.
Clearly not.
I think it's beautiful. To me, it looks like a Daytona, like a new version of Don Johnson's car from Miami Vice.
Yeah.
You know?
I have to say, I'm really happy to hear you say that because I think it's so cool. I think it's awesome. And the car, from what I saw, got so much hate online. Everything I posted about it on social media, people were ripping it up and just saying it looks terrible and Ferrari's lost their way and all of this stuff. And I'm sorry, I think it's awesome. And if the masses can't understand that, then that's their problem. But from someone who saw it in real life, and I'm glad you concur, Matt, I think it's so badass.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them, both the coupe and the convertible look rad, and they do look like the Daytona in the front, which is super cool and which is really raising in value right now. Like on Bring a Trailer, if you look
I would
at
love
other
to
places.
have a Daytona.
Right?
Yeah.
So cool. First of all, these cars, I think the coupe starts at about $423,000. They haven't
the 12-cylinder.
announced. Yeah. They haven't announced American pricing yet, but basically the conversion right now with European prices is like $420,000. So we're talking extremely rarefied air.
That's going to be the MSRP, right? Because the truth is, you can't probably buy one unless you've bought a couple of the cheaper Ferraris. That's how their dealership network works.
Yes.
And then if you get it in the second hand, the aftermarket, it's going to already have gone way up from there.
Completely. Yeah. And I always ask guys, tell me about the allocations. It's obviously not just about who can pay for it. It's a mixture of things. And the first thing every executive will say to me is, oh, well, it's up to the dealers. And the second thing they say is, well, it's about passion. And when they say it's about passion, what they really mean is how many other Ferraris have you bought first? And then maybe we'll talk about, you can also buy this one.
To me, that is a huge turnoff. And Jay Leno famously says he will never buy a Ferrari because of that kind of snobby, you have to have purchased a few others before you can get this. And it's up to the dealership. That's such a cop-out, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But here, my question is, how do they get around it? And here's the thing. Ferrari is in a league of its own in the world of cars because it's valued like an actual luxury brand along with Cartier and actual luxury brands. It's the only automaker that Bloomberg Intelligence really puts in a class of its own. The average price of a Ferrari is 4 times higher than the price of the average Porsche. So it really is in a league of their own. They put out these cars and price them at $400,000 because they can get that much money for them. They've built their business on selling fewer cars and making fewer cars than they can sell, and that really works for them. So at the end of the day, you're always going to be disappointing somebody at the dealership. And, maybe it is fair that, hey, people who have been around longer and have really been around the brand and shown that they're involved and invested in it, maybe that actually is the most fair way to sell the cars.
I guess so. And to be honest, I'm never going to buy one anyway, certainly not a new Ferrari. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about the beauty of this engine, which is in the name. It's a 12-cylinder again, which I don't know if that was expected, that they continue to put out 12 cylinders. Lamborghini has as well. It's got to be difficult with the regulations around the world that they face in every single different jurisdiction. But is it a hybrid?
No, it's not a hybrid. I think this is really also Ferrari saying, yes, we're going to come out with a full EV next year. And yes, we're building a factory to make hybrid and electric cars, in Italy. But also, don't worry, we're still going to be producing internal combustion engines because they have made a lot of news this year about how they are transitioning to electric vehicles and, yada, yada, yada. But I think they are also.
Well, and they build a hybrid also.
Saying, yeah, well, the 296 that I drove, which is a great car, honestly.
Are the cars that you saw in Miami finished vehicles? Can you tell what the interior is going to look like? What the infotainment is going to be?
Yes, the interior is the same as in the Roma. If you've been in the Roma, and it's basically
which I love. By the way, love the Roma.
Same. This is weird that we have the same taste in Ferraris because we don't have the same taste about many things.
True.
But it's like their dual zone cockpit, which basically is made to make the driver and the passenger feel like they both sort of have a cockpit and can control things like climate and audio and, entertainment and all of that. So if you've been in the Roma, you've seen it. I know that's like kind of a snotty thing to say, but it's the same. And it has
I have
that,
been in someone else's Roma just to look.
There you go.
I saw a guy in a parking lot and I was like, let me see that.
Yes. And it does have that like fake gated shifter on it where it's sort of like in the center console. Ferrari is famous for their gated shifters, which click, click, click sounds super cool. It's very nostalgic.
And they never make anymore.
Correct.
And haven't for decades, yeah.
Correct. But now, they've done like something that kind of looks like a gated shifter and you sort of move the little lever forward and back to go into drive. So it's the same. There's nothing really new there. I do like that they retain some buttons. I don't like the even in the 296, honestly, trying to control some of the audio, it's all like touchscreen. I'm not a huge fan of that. No, it's distracting.
Let me ask about, 12 cylinders, not a hybrid. It's essentially the follow-on to the 812, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So one thing I wonder is, you mentioned the gated shifter. Why won't they ever make those again? My kid brother is like looking for used Ferraris. It's like his latest obsession. And he's noticed, and he's right, that the ones with manual transmissions are worth a lot more.
Yes.
We're talking 30, 40-year-old Ferraris. But
yes.
if they have a manual transmission,
Yep.
they're worth so much more. Doesn't Ferrari see that and say, we should make one again?
I don't know the answer to that, other than what I intuit is that they're not purchased. Like, when it really comes down to it,
they aren't ordered when they're new.
Yes, consumers, at least in the United States, and this is the biggest market by far, actually, when it really comes down to it, American buyers don't option for those. They might for some 911s, maybe even like some Subarus. But everything that I've ever, I don't know the answer to that, other than it's like the wagon question. Like, why don't automakers make more wagons?
Right.
And because we think they're very cool. But whenever you ask, same with the gated shifters and sticks, manual transmissions in general, like when you ask automakers that, the answer is always they're not really optioned. They're not sold. They're not
It's so weird
chosen.
because if you look on Bring a Trailer, obviously, they will even put in the headline, 6-speed manual, because they know it brings more bids.
I think part of it, too, is a generational thing where people who have the money to buy a classic car with a manual transmission probably know how to drive manual transmissions and are a little bit older, potentially, than people buying a new car. That's a theory.
Let's quickly get on to Miami, because I mean to F1, because I want to hear about your Formula One experience. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Ferrari launch was apparently a huge part of it, with a 600-person dinner on South Beach, right? But like the race, how awesome was it?
Okay, so the thing is, this was my first time at the Miami race. I'd been to Vegas and I'd been to Austin a couple times. This was the first time I'd been there, and it was not as bad as I thought it would be in terms of logistics. I had heard nightmares about getting to the track, which is in Hard Rock Stadium, which is not close to South Beach. It took me about 90 minutes to get there by car before the race. Also, the race is in the hottest part of the day at like 4 in the afternoon, so I'd heard a lot about parking is a struggle, water is an issue. And I think Miami, in its third year, has really adjusted and listened to feedback and fixed a lot of those things. I actually found that ingress and egress to the race and amenities at the race were pretty good. And also we heard a lot less complaining from the drivers about the track, which I think is a really good sign. It was an exciting race. Obviously, Lando Norris won, which was a big deal that Max Verstappen didn't win. And nothing against Max Verstappen, but it's nice to see the podium shook up a little bit. Yeah. So that was really exciting. It was Lando's first win ever. So that was really great.
So awesome for him.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's such a huge accomplishment for these drivers. When you see someone like Max or when you see Lewis winning all the time, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But there aren't that many people who have won a Formula One Grand Prix. So
I know. And Lando Norris was literally in tears afterward.
I'm sure, yeah.
I mean, it was so emotional. And I do think this is a great thing that we do have a race that's a little more exciting. I saw the numbers that actually this Miami Grand Prix was the highest watch Formula One Grand Prix ever on television, with over 3 million viewers.
Wow.
So that's a really, really good sign. I think Miami is really settling in and finding its spot. Vegas is great.
That's got to be 3 million viewers in the U.S. alone, right? Because globally they have, like Top Gear numbers, like hundreds of millions of viewers.
Yes, 3 million viewers in the U.S. on watched ABC's news coverage.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's really good. And, Vegas is its own thing. I love that the Vegas race is literally on the streets of Vegas, on the Strip. You can see the race from your hotel room, or you can just walk down to the Strip. I really love that. And I wish that Miami would be run like down South Beach at night. That would be very cool, because then that would eliminate the drive and the heat and everything like that. But
But they wouldn't have as much control over the surface, and that's been a problem.
And that has really been a problem. And I would also say, honestly, in Miami, it really felt like the race was almost beside the point. There was so much going on there in terms of like Carbone Beach and crazy parties and, lots of salsa music, which I love, and amazing food. It was an assault on the senses in every way. I love seeing the fashions. It was like people figured out how to wear the least amount of clothing and dress up at the same time, which was kind of amazing. Everyone was in a really good mood. People are happy. It feels very international there right now, which I love.
Yeah, so that's very cool. That's always cool about Miami, right? You've got the South American vibe in there.
Completely. And you know what was also weird, though? And I did ask organizers about this. All through, I went all down South Beach. I went to the design district. I kind of poked around a bit because I wanted to see what the city was like aside from the race. And the weird thing was there was zero signage about Formula One anywhere in the city. Even driving on the way to the track, there were no signs saying welcome racing fans. You could have been anywhere in Miami and you would have had no idea there was a Formula race happening. And it was to the point where I did send an email to one of my contacts who was working to organize the race. And she said that they basically spent all their budget for advertising up front when they were selling tickets.
Right.
and that left... when the race actually was happening, there literally was not even in the airport. There was no signage. So I don't know. I would have liked to see some signage to make it feel festive and exciting and like you're a big part of something. There was none of that.
Yeah, but or also, to get there. Like if you're confused on a motorcycle.
Correct. There was honestly zero.
So we spoke with Tyler Epps, who is in charge of organizing the thing, and he said, take the bus. You didn't take the bus?
No. Oh, no. No. But I did see the buses. And I also saw a ton of pedicabs, which is kind of cool, like ferrying people back and forth. I actually had a press parking pass, so I parked closer in, which thank God for that.
Yes.
It was, I admit I was spoiled on that because I did have a press parking
So
pass.
it's also, I think it's a different experience for a luxury reporter like you who's going to Carbone and to every event than it is for somebody who's trying to do it on a budget. But it is possible, right? To do it on a bit of a budget and see, like, if you only care about the race, you don't have to spend all the extra money, stay at the fancy hotels, go to the amazing restaurants. You can do it.
Yeah, completely. And look, we're guilty of it. Of course, the $280 lobster roll is what makes headlines. Yes, if you want to spend $280 on a lobster roll and just like completely ball out, you can do that. That's what we write about. That's what makes the headlines. But honestly, you can buy a hot dog and bring your own water in and just enjoy the race. I mean, that's what, I was going to say that's what my family would have done. Just pack a little lunch, buy your general admission tickets, and you can kind of make it whatever adventure you want. And I do take Tyler at his word. They did do a good job of having, the food trucks, of having general admission passes that were relatively affordable. There was a lot of stuff in sort of the fan area that people could just walk around and you didn't have to buy anything. You could just be there and enjoy it. Yeah. So the mood was really good.
Obviously the elite is a draw for Formula One. That's part of the mystique. But most people, don't shell out $280 or even $28 for a lobster roll. It's just insane.
It's insane. Yeah.
And most people don't drive to the race in a Ferrari.
No.
But I imagine you did, right?
I had to for the review. I had to.
All right, so the 296. I'm interested to hear about this because I've heard so many people say, like, this car is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I know it's kind of like supposedly the successor to the Dino, which was the 6-cylinder Ferrari. And I've always thought it's kind of budget. I don't mean that in a snobby way, but 6 cylinders to me, unless they're flat or in a line, doesn't make much sense. Tell me about the car.
Okay. First of all, the car looks cool. And I am shallow enough to be really swayed by how a car looks.
I'm right there
with
you.
The car looks awesome. It photographs awesome. I had it all over the bridges, like Rickenbacker Causeway, whatever that one is, down by the water. You over to Key Biscayne. I shot the heck out of that thing, and it photographs great. It looks like a Ferrari. It was some sort of cool blue color. The car looks awesome. And I also liked, speaking about the V6 hybrid, that it cuts the engine out at low speed automatically to go under hybrid power. And I actually like that driving down South Beach going slow, because the car is so flashy. The additional sound of an engine is just like, for me, it just is screaming for attention that I don't want. So I actually loved being in the hybrid mode and with no engine sound.
So all electric mode.
Yes, because like on Collins Avenue, it's largely pedestrian. You're just going very slow, sort of cruising, taking it all in. And that was actually surprisingly very cool, because
That's great, because the worst thing is when you see these
and they're just screaming
DBs, driving down the avenue with the loudest motor, and they can't even go fast. Yeah,
completely. It's too. So that I actually really surprisingly like that. The car still does 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. So it's instant. It's so fast. The steering is somehow wired into your brain. It's like you even think about turning and the car is there. I have to say the turning radius was not good at all. Of course, it's a little stressful driving a Ferrari around anyway. It's an expensive car. Drivers in Miami are not courteous, I'll say. And you're kind of always looking over your shoulder for anything.
But I heard it sounds, when you have the motor on, obviously.
Yeah.
I heard it sounds amazing. Someone said melodious, I feel like Steve Serio said he would take a 296. Like,
he probably would.
A lot of people are raving about this V6 Ferrari, which to me, and the fact that it has engine start-stop makes it even worse in my mind.
I know. Usually I agree, but don't forget, this is an 800 plus horsepower car. It still has a Ferrari engine in it. They're not like these guys. Someone said to me, Ferrari doesn't make cars, they make engines, which I thought was really cool. Like, yeah, it's a V6, but in a way, if anyone's going to do a V6, let Ferrari do it and let them do it right. And, I had no quibbles with the engine at all. I think you're more into engine technology than me. I want something to be fun to drive and to look cool. Whatever's under the hood, like if it works, it works. Well,
I agree. If it sounds good and if it feels warm, the thing I don't like about V6s or the infamous 2-liter 4-cylinder motor that every Econobox has is that they feel so cold and small and empty. And I want the feeling. I want the sound and the vibes of the engine to like move my chest, Yeah,
it's not going to feel like an 812. It's just not. But I also think this is a different tool. Right. This is a different tool. It's just a different thing. It's not going to feel like,
Well, I've just heard such rave reviews that I'm...
Yeah, and it still has this X factor that you feel connected to the machine and you feel like it's talking to you. You feel like there's a conversation and an exchange with the car that you are constantly adjusting for and responding to and relating to, which I really like. It has a soul. It has a soul.
That's the important part. And I've found that in smaller motors lately. Like I was saying the other day, the BMW 530 with only an inline 4, I was having a great conversation with that motor. So it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be done right. And there are V6s that, the Ford Bronco Raptor, even the base Bronco with a 2.7 liter V6, I like that motor, and I love the Raptor V6. So there are some exceptions, but I just feel like Ferrari should be either the screaming flat plane V8 or a 12-cylinder. But I obviously haven't driven.
I predict that you have a 296 in your future, a drive in it. I do predict this will happen, and I bet you will really like it. And look. there's a brand that has made its money on flat six engines, and we don't complain about that.
No, they scream. I love them. Yeah,
right, right.
So, okay, let me ask one other thing, which I'm glad you mentioned the Porsche, because Porsche, I think, does this right where a lot of other luxury car makers do it wrong. And it's ironic because Porsches are more affordable than a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or an Aston Martin or any of the, you think of it, the big six-figure. Yes. They have, for the most part, these big motors and these beautiful designs, which I think to some extent justify their price tags, and also usually plush interiors. But they all, with the exception of Porsche, seem to have a big giant fail when it comes to infotainment. Like they can't do the electronics on the interior right for the most part. And I haven't driven a lot of Ferrari, so I don't know how they are at this. If I bought a new Porsche, the infotainment is going to be seamless and it's going to be intuitive.
Flawless. Yes.
And I'm going to love it.
It's not going to get in the way.
Whereas with Lamborghini, like the Huracan Serato that I drove was like my favorite car ever. But if I'm driving from Manhattan back to Westchester in traffic and I want to listen to the Grateful Dead and I can't figure out how to stream it from my phone, that's really annoying on a $400,000 car.
And dangerous because it's distracting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I'm not in love with Ferrari's infotainment. It is distracting. It's not intuitive. You have to go through multiple layers of icons to get to simple things like the radio. Ferrari, this 296 on the steering wheel, you control like audio. You control everything with your thumb on a touch pad, which is really distracting and not intuitive. So I am not a fan at all. And I think someone said to me, I was basically with Italians all weekend. Someone said to me, Italians are great at making simple things complex. And that may be true.
Yeah.
And we love them for it. The thing is, they're so charming and fun that we forgive them for everything. But it does seem to be really a low point of an otherwise great car. I totally agree with you. I don't think Lamborghini is much better. And I also think it feels like an afterthought. Like if you're really a serious car person, you should just never listen to the radio and only listen to the engine ever.
And that's what every forum commenter says. Yes, I just listen to the motor. Yeah, well, fine, dude. If you're stuck in traffic. Yeah.
Completely. So I think it does feel like it's an afterthought, and that these cars are so great and fast and sporty that you really don't need any infotainment anyway, and you really shouldn't even have a cup holder or be drinking coffee in the car. You should only be driving in silence, which I just don't agree with. And Porsche
nails it. When they have a transmission tunnel that has like 50 buttons on it, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I love
all right, listen, let's put a pin in this because next week we're going to talk about Aston Martins and a couple of Aston Martins.
Dueling Aston Martins.
Yeah, that we've driven. Yes. And I'm thinking there may be stark differences. But we should also ask people to email us with their thoughts. Does the infotainment matter? Do you like the new design of Ferrari that kind of breaks with their avant-garde tradition? Like there's so much I'd love to hear from our listeners. So the email address is
hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. That's hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. And who makes your favorite infotainment system? I'd love to know that in general.
Yeah.
Like who
makes your favorite infotainment system?
Mercedes is pretty good. If you can tolerate a high screen count, Mercedes is Mercedes is the most advanced. No question.
I think the M-Bucks, agreed, is Mercedes-Benz user experience is the best. For a while, BMW's what was it, the iDrive system was so good, and then in this new iteration, they've made it so complex.
I know,
and you've got to dig through modes in the screen that. But
they'll come back. They'll bounce
back. But Porsche's quite good as well. All right, that's all we have time for this week. But I'm really looking forward to hearing your impressions on Aston Martin. You went to Sevilla and drove the Vantage, right?
Yes, I did. I did.
You're driving the DB12 right now, or
I'm getting it tomorrow morning.
Okay, so
you've got it this week.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Also 12 cylinders, which is amazing. Convertible, I love it. But interesting infotainment and experience. That's all for this week. We'll see you back here next week, same time, same place. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.